Okay, so the next set of filters I want to talk about are neural filters, and these are brand new to Photoshop, and these are a nice improvement upon some of the filters that have been in the filter gallery now for a lot of time. Um, and so again, we'll take a look at kind of this new filter that they've added. And let's start by taking this image right here of a surprised looking cat, and let's go up to filter. Now I want to point something out that might not have made clear before. Right here is where I get the option to add the neural filter to any image that I want. Since the last filter that I used was a neural filter, you'll see that it pops up right here. Now, I don't want to apply that one. The reason is if I do apply this to this image, it's going to apply it with the exact same settings that it used for the last image. And I won't have the ability to edit that. So if there are times where you have 10 images that all need the exact same amount of sharpening or the exact same effect that you want to apply, then this is really convenient because this top option allows you to keep reapplying the same effect with the same settings multiple times. But in this case, I want to start fresh. So I'm going to go to neural filter here. And now again, normally I would convert to a smart filter, but this is simply just an example of what these filters do. I'm not concerned about this image. This isn't something that I'm doing for a client, so to speak. So what do we see when we get to neural filters? Well, we see a couple options, and this is actually what we call a beta filter, meaning that they're still working on it. And so we see the option for skin smoothing, sort of an automatic skin smoothing. And if you want to use that, you can click this button right here to turn it on. But as we can see, it doesn't seem to want to be available. Or maybe I need to download this one. Now, to be clear, you will have to download any of these effects that you want to apply. And again, it doesn't appear to be giving me the option to do the skin smoothing one. So I can move on to JPEG artifact removal. Now, JPEG artifacts are the pixelation of an image when you have used a lot of compression. And in fact, this image right here does show a lot of that. If you look at these edges right here, these are showing artifacts of JPEG compression. If I zoom in, you can just sort of see the pixels. And that is because this is a very low res, camera phone image shot in bad lighting. So I could download this and apply it. And you'll see if I click right here on this little cloud, it says this filter must be downloaded first. And I can click download, and it went pretty quick. And so this is an example right there of a neural filter. And you can see that I can apply it right now. In fact, it may have already applied it. Let's see. Yep, it applied high. Now, again, you can see it doesn't give me the best control as far as choosing options and whatnot. But let's take a look here and see if we can get a before and after. There it is with it. And reset parameters. Turn it off. I'm not seeing a huge difference on that one. And like I said, this is a beta effect. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. What I am going to worry about is this style transfer, because this one works. This one I've tested extensively, and we'll talk about it right now. So just like the JPEG artifact removal, you will have to download this. I've already gone ahead and done that. So I'm going to turn it on. And by turning it on, first thing that happens is my mouse freezes. Okay? This is a extremely high resolution effect that takes some processing to apply. And my computer is relatively fast, and it still slows down my computer. Now, we can clearly see some results right there that look pretty interesting. Let's talk about what just happened there. So, first thing I'm going to do is click this Show More. So these are pre-loaded images that I just downloaded, And essentially what it's doing is it's applying this first one, I believe, to my image. And again, as far as telling you exactly what's happening here, it's applying the, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I have gone through and played with a bunch of these images. And once you do that, you will quickly start to see the results you get. So I just clicked on a different image, and you can see in the upper right-hand corner of my screen, a little blue circle that is slowly working its way around. That is that's basically letting you know that it's loading. And really your best bet is to just click on each one of these images and see what it does. But one thing that you can do to modify these images or modify your results is come down to the bottom here. And down here at the bottom we have about 6 options. The first one is preserve color. So obviously it's blending these images in with the image that I have already, and it's sort of applying the paint strokes of those images to this real life image. And the first thing I can do is I can preserve the color, because it's also applying the colors of these images. For example, if I click on this one, give it a second, this sort of rainbow one down here at the bottom, you will see once it gets done loading that it's going to apply the brush strokes and the colors from that image to my image here of this cat. And as you can see, even on my computer, it takes a while. So be patient, but take comfort in knowing that it's probably going to be worth it. This has taken an awful long time, but it's been my experience that that's just how these work. So this one doesn't have a whole lot in the way of paint strokes, but it definitely applies color. So this might be one where I probably wouldn't want to preserve my color, but if I did, preserving color would preserve the colors of the original image and really sort of limit it just to the brush strokes of whatever you select. So if I choose preserve color, you see that this one doesn't really do much. It just kind of adds weird brush strokes that I can't say impress me all that much. But let's come up to a shot like this one right here, and you'll see that we're going to get a lot more in the way of brush strokes. But there's a lot of things that after experimenting with this effect that I think affect it pretty heavily. And one thing that I've realized is that it tends to work best on bold images with large objects. Now that might not always be the case, but I started with a couple different images, and I'll show you those in a second. So here again, we've applied the colors from this image, and you can see it's brought in the oranges and some of the darker colors and some of the brush strokes. Now let's go ahead and click preserve color. And you see that again, that just adds the brush strokes without really adding the color. Now if we turn that off, now let's choose focus subject, which again doesn't have a huge effect. All I found was, see, you can see right there when it bounced, it doesn't really, I mean, how to explain what's happening there? It's just a slight shift in color. Makes the subject a little bit stand out a little bit more if you choose focus subject. Now, of course, we also have strength, so I could drop that down, and you can see it, you know, starts to mix it in more subtly with the original image. Personally, I think if I'm going to add something like this, I want to go 100%. And then we have brush size. And brush size really kind of affects detail. The larger the brush size, the larger these brush strokes end up being. And you sort of get a less detailed image because you're dealing with larger brush strokes. If you shrink them down more, you'll see that the brush strokes tend to get smaller and you get a little more detail. Now again, this image is not all that great for showing what this does. So I've got a few other images queued up here to show you guys. But along with changing the strength and the brush size, you can also try to blur the background. Crank that up all the way. Again, it supposedly can figure out where the background is. Now this background's not terribly detailed, so I can't imagine blurring it is going to have a great effect. And like everything with this filter, it seems to take a while to do it. And I was really excited about this filter when I first saw it, and there we go. So, there's our blurred background. I don't know if it's any blurrier than it was. Without that, I can't say that I think that really made a huge difference. And then we also have just a straight brightness control, which, again, doesn't exactly excite me. And then, of course, your output. Where is it going to put this change? Now, look at the options that you have. Current layer, meaning that it's going to put it right on top of the photo of the cat, and it will essentially be destructive in that I won't be able to toggle off its visibility. I can tell it to duplicate the entire layer and put the effect on that layer, in which case it would duplicate the picture of my cat and put the effect on the top layer. Duplicate layer masked. Well, again, I can duplicate a layer and mask it to add this effect as well. But for me, I just added it as a new layer, which essentially means that I have the layer with my cat, and then I have an additional layer on top of it with this effect. Had I converted the cat into a smart filter, I could add it as a smart filter, which in the long run probably is the best way to go. But for the sake of this demonstration, I just threw it on as a new layer. Let me show you what that looks like. If I click OK, it's going to commit this to my image. And while I said that smart filters give you the maximum sort of level of non-destructive change, the fact is putting it on its own layer basically does the exact same thing. As you can see, just a ridiculously slow filter. And it's outputting it right now, and my mouse is frozen, and we just have to sort of wait patiently. Not my favorite type of filter, but is what it is. There we go. So you can see here I can turn off this top layer. This top layer is now the filter layer. If I turn it off, I get back to the original image. Now, you're looking at this thinking, well, it's kind of adding some color and a little bit of texture, but it's not really that cool. It's just sort of another one of these brush strokey looking Photoshop layers, which I've never been terribly impressed with. Now, let me just clarify, that is not the case with this filter. You can do some amazing things with this filter, so I'm going to show you how to do them. Let's look at a couple examples. So here's the skateboarder that I showed you earlier, and if we add the neural filter, we can create, again, just sort of that brush stroke look, which I got to admit I'm not a huge fan of, but maybe there's a situation where it's appropriate. And I tried a lot of images like this and just found that it didn't really seem to give me anything exciting or all that unique. So I thought, okay, well, let's try some different images. And then I got to this image, which I thought, let's try something that's just sort of a spattering of color with not a lot of detail. And can't say that this one really blew me away either. It just did kind of what layer brush strokes do, or excuse me, filter, these stylize, these oil paint find edges, just kind of those ones. And I wasn't terribly impressed with that. But then I took this picture right here, which is sort of a face. And notice how the image is, the subject's really bold in the image. It really stands out. And I applied this matrix looking filter, which is literally just ones and zeros, as you can maybe sort of see. I'll go back and show you in the effect gallery. And all of a sudden I went, oh, now there's something that's interesting. So I thought, all right, well, it's time to man up and take a self-portrait and see what I can come up with. And that's where I fell in love with this filter. Because as you can see here, it's early in the morning. I've yet to even comb my hair. I wasn't in a bad mood, but I'm clearly not smiling. Just sort of looking at the phone, taking a self-portrait. And this is what I ended up with. And this blew me away. I love this. But what I love also about this is not just the effect that we got, but the level of modification we can do to this effect. And what I mean by that is that if I select the effect layer and I hit Command U, that's going to bring up a hue saturation effect. Now, this is not a adjustment layer. I could add one of those if I want, but this actually goes right on the layer and is, for all intents and purposes, destructive although I've been able to go back and make adjustments to it by just hitting Command U and have had no problem. And what I like about this is that I can change the hue. And that to me just seems like a pretty cool effect. This is, I think, how it came out originally. A lot of reds and teals. And I like it a lot. But I also like coming in here and modifying it and seeing what my options are. And, you know, going from this teal to green, very cool. Now there's also spots where we can, of course, using this hue saturation filter, we can go in and target just the greens and then just change those, leaving the background relatively unchanged. And I can desaturate things. We can add saturation. I mean, and just look at the effects we get. We can take the lightness and play with that and desaturate it a little bit maybe. Give it a really kind of gritty, old look. So our assignment for this week is going to be to take a self-portrait with your iPhone and give me something that is interesting. Now, I'll show you how I created this exactly, and let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll look at just a couple more examples before we end this video. So if I click OK, let's go ahead and just delete this example. I'm going to ditch the effect. I'm going to hit the V key just so I'm on my selection tool. Now again, I think what helps is a relatively unobstructed background. We have the window here and just a white wall there. And again, we'll go Filter, Neural Filter. Remember, don't go to that one unless you want the exact same effect you applied the last time you used it. Let's go to Filter, not Filter Gallery. Let's go to Neural Filter and cancel. So again, Filter, Neural Filter. And for this one, again, we'll go to Style Transfer. We'll click that button to turn it on. Again, if you're doing this for the first time, you will have to download these effects, which might take a minute. And you can see that something that kind of bothers me is it just goes right ahead and puts the very first one on there. Okay, so you can see that it puts this very first filter on, which again, like I said, given the amount of processing time it takes, I just assume it not put a filter on until I choose one, but Photoshop doesn't give us that option. Now, this one's all right, and again, if this is the look you're going for, then come down here and decide if you want to play with the brush stroke sizes, make it a little grittier. If you want to preserve the color of the image and not sort of take on the colors of the overlay, then you can hit Preserve Color. And, you know, you get something that's kind of interesting. Focus subject, as you can see, doesn't seem to have much of an effect from what I can tell. Try to blur the background. Doesn't, it kind of gives you a little sort of faux shallow depth of field. And then, of course, you can adjust the brightness to make it darker or brighter. But for me, what I found out to be kind of the most interesting, or at least the one I enjoyed playing with, was this one right here, this tattoo one. This tends to give you strong black lines and some really interesting colors, and it's a lot of fun to play around with. And all you have to do to change these is just click a different box, and you'll see that little window or that little wheel in the upper right begin to spin. And it's going to take a little bit to apply these effects, but you tend to get a little bit more of a graphic look with this tattoo effect. Now, again, just remember though, while you're looking at this, maybe you're thinking, well, I don't really want yellow. Well, remember that all we have to do is apply this, and when we're done, we can then go play with the colors using a hue saturation, either an adjustment level layer or by hitting Command U to add hue saturation. So like I said, I thought this was pretty neat, or at least a pretty neat effect that you could add with one click. I like the colors that it brought in. I think it looks really interesting. Again, focus subject. It changes things, but not in a way that I could really describe or explain. If you go with a smaller brush size, you see it kind of brings in more brush detail into the lines, and I think that looks interesting. But I mean, this is the cool thing. You guys get to play around with this and come up with what you like. So pick any of these that you think looks neat and apply it to a self-portrait. And then when you're done, we'll click OK. Now, we're not done with this filter yet. I'll show you just a few more things about it. But let's go ahead and click OK. And just reiterate the fact that we can modify this even further once we're done. And the way we do that, there's actually 3 different ways to do this as far as playing with these colors. Again, you can see that it's so demanding that even the wheel stops spinning in the lower right-hand corner of my screen because every ounce of processing power appears to be going towards this image. Now, so again, anytime we've got an image and an original photo, we can always try blending between them and see what that does for us. Again, you get some pretty interesting effects here. And you can decide, like that right there is pretty interesting. You can decide what you think works for you. Look at that. And of course, hue, saturation, luminosity, color. So blend modes give you another layer, another level of control, blending, selecting the top layer and going to your blend modes. Of course, you could also just drop the opacity. But that usually tends to be the least interesting way to blend 2 images together. Now, as I said, you can click on this layer and you could either go to Image, Adjustment, Hue, Saturation. And if you click this one, it's going to apply a filter right onto this layer. Now, that's what I did earlier, only I used the key command of Command U. Or if you are worried that you don't want to mess this up, you can come down to Adjustment Layers and grab a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer, which again will put it on its own layer and allow you to then come in here and play with your colors. Now you can either do a global change, which is going to shift everything, or if you like the teal, but maybe you just want to change the red, you can go to this drop down right here and select the reds and just, brighten them up, desaturate them, or drop them down, bring in more saturation, less saturation. Or of course, you can just slide the hue slider and change the color itself. So like I said, this turned out to be a pretty cool filter. And it's going to get even better. They're not done with it yet. This is the beta version. Let's hop back over. Let's look at a couple more images. We'll get rid of the cat one because that was a bit of a fail. But then I have this picture of my daughter, who is actually a very cute little girl, but she's making a face here. And I absolutely loved the effect that this had on it. Let's go ahead and hop back over to this image, and we'll hop back into the neural filter real quick just to see what else it can do. So I'm going to delete those layers. I'll go back to Filter, Neural Filter, and you can see what's coming down the pipeline here. So on this first one, you see there's these 2 options right here. This one's like a featured filter, and again, skin smoothing, which I haven't downloaded yet, nor would I want to trust a filter to smooth skin. I mean, again, I have to play with it. Maybe it's the best thing ever. Or maybe if I was a portrait photographer and that sped up my workflow. But right now I'm happy to use the history brush, or the spot healing brush, excuse me. JPEG artifact removal. If you've got over compressed JPEGs and you want to make them look smoother, supposedly this will do that. Style transfer is the one that we've been playing around with. But if we hit this little beta filters here, you will see that there are a bunch of these. And I imagine you've probably seen a few of these in social media in different places, and that is because, well, that probably inspired a lot of these. And as you can see, I haven't downloaded this one yet. I can download it, and evidently it will make me look older than I already am. So we'll skip that one. Makeup transfer. That's pretty interesting. You can take a photo of someone with some specific makeup, and it'll put it right on your face. Depth aware. Depth aware haze adds environmental haze around the subject and adjust the warmth of its surroundings. So you can see we're getting into some really interesting effects that might be great. Now colorize, I think I played around with this one, and I guess you need a black and white photo to begin with. It might be fun to desaturate this image and then try to apply it. But I can't say I saw any real amazing effects. Super zoom allows you to zoom in on an image. Now normally zooming in on an image is going to give you pixelation, and it's going to ruin your image because you're zooming in on it. But this promises to smooth out even areas that it's zoomed in on. And again, not something that I'm necessarily too concerned about, but could be very cool. So those are some additional ones. There's also going to be noise reduction, face cleanup, photo to sketch, sketch to portrait. I don't remember if I played with these or not. But at the end of the day, that's what we all have to do here. We all have to, I think only these ones in beta, or only the ones that are downloadable, are available. These ones are probably coming down the pipeline and will probably be announced in an update to Adobe Photoshop in the future. But as you can see, these are all kind of things that I've seen in different places on Instagram, and Photoshop is doing everything it can to incorporate them. So get in there, play around with them. Again, there's nothing complicated necessarily. Just remember to turn it on and then select the frame. And again, this one's going to pre-select the first frame, which just means it's going to waste a little bit of your time. Let's go ahead and click OK on this one. And let's go in and just tweak the colors and see what we can do with this sort of crosshatch style. So again, I'm going to hit Command U to bring up my hue saturation. And of course, I could just target the yellows if I want to start there. Change that to a different color. Or desaturate it. Or supersaturate it. Again, depends on what you're going for. Increase the lightness. And again, right now we're just targeting the yellows. Turn it down. Darken it up, brighten it up, and then maybe come over and set it back to master, and now I can affect the entire image. Which for some reason this teal and green looks pretty cool, but there's a lot of interesting things you can do. So that is it for neural filters.